I grew up in Michigan. Michigan has the Michigan Educational Assessment Program test, and it's a horrible test. It lasts several days, and I remember that when I was like probably about third, fourth, and fifth grade, they would always be very strict about how you took the test, and the only thing that people would get excited about was little graham crackers that you'd get, like the little animal crackers and juice. But it always caused severe stress on the students because Michigan's a lot like Texas. It's a high stakes test, or high stakes state, meaning by that if you fail that test, you actually have to repeat the grade, causing more problems with funding and such for the schools. And I'm going to prove to you that testing, the standardized testing, isn't the best method used for funding schools and deciding whether teachers are meeting the core standards for their methods of teaching. The No Child Left Behind Act was kind of the founding program for defining the standards for standardized testing, and it created more federal power within school districts and how they were run. And it was initially created to close in the gap between poor districts like Detroit, or Killeen, I guess if you will, to the high and wealthy school districts that had, I guess, more privileged students, if you will. And it was also viewed that America was going down in their status in educational standards as far as the world goes, in China and Japan and Korea and India and all those countries were moving up in status, and it was designed to, in essence, close that gap. And it also increased sanctions on school districts and how they function. So, like, say if a school wasn't meeting the standard, they would take away funding, or in cases like Detroit, where they failed so many years in a row, they would actually close them down, thus causing schools to be more packed with students and causing even more failures. This is a graph that I found that demonstrates in New York, actually, just since No Child Left Behind, the increased rate of dropouts across all ethnicities, as you can see, and an overall increase of over like 3% of dropouts. This is from New York City, but it's across the country. This is one of the best graphs that I could find. Views on standardized testing. Teachers as a whole, they aren't a big fan of it. It's been viewed as like an increased stressor in order to meet the standards. In fact, the STAR test is one of them that I'll cover that they actually proved because it replaced the TAC test, and they had little to no time to prepare. And because of how it is, it's just causing so much problems. In fact, there's one teacher that goes on to say, tests are an important factor to help determine the success in areas of need within a curriculum. But she also feels it's the hands-on daily STEM activities that make content relevant and retainable for the students. And this is from a Miss Nancy Misaraka, who's a fourth grade teacher at Brook Creek Elementary at Tarpon Springs. And that's important because, well, she views it as they're not going to learn anything because of the standardized testing. They're just learning to memorize and spew out information. Now, how many of y'all have watched the TV show Mythbusters? Probably most of you. Well, Adam Savage, he's one of the scientists and special effects members on that show, and he's quite an impact in the science community. He goes on to say that if you can't bring the test scores up, you need to bring back band and bring back shop in order to actually have the kids learning instead of teaching them how to take a test. And that kind of reinforces the same standard. They're not learning, they're just learning to spew out information for a test, and they're actually causing more issues when they get onto higher education in college. And he said that to the Tampa Bay Times. Oh, also, parents for the STAR test, they were actually causing outrage over that STAR testing. One example is just recently, this last year, there was actually a committee formed to actually sue the state over how many issues the STAR test caused because of the length and the number of failures. The STAR test, as I was explaining a little bit earlier, has a very poor passing rate. It's actually one of the worst passing rates within the country. And it's an ineffective method because, well, they're not learning. And one thing that I found out that was kind of interesting was it replaced the tax, as you can see down there, in 2007, but it caused issues because instead of learning it cumulatively, they were having to learn material for a whole year, but they were having to do the whole year's worth of material in March, which is before the school ends, so they were having to memorize a couple bits of material before school that was supposed to be covered after the STAR test. And again, disapproving parents. There was a committee that was formed just recently, again, to sue. And there's also outrage since the beginning just because of the poor standardized testing rate and, again, with No Child Left Behind Act. Here is a graph that demonstrates some of the STAR testing results just recently from 2014 and 15 and 13. As you can see, it's well below benchmark standards for what it should be. And that's actually kind of surprising because with that No Child Left Behind Act, they made a standard that said the state could determine what was a passing rate to report to the federal government in order to cut big funding. However, the STAR testing is just so unreasonably high, as you can see, so it's actually causing funding issues for the